by the track directly away at the time.
Okay, we're just getting things sorted out, so please bear with me. Because I use a second screen to watch the chat, so, and it's working this evening, hurrah! Okay. So I can now see, hopefully, how many people are watching live, which is good. Okay, so let's go and get the aircraft sorted out. So we're sat on the ground at Melbourne at the moment. I'm just going to go and change the controller configuration to suit the CJ4, so which I'm doing now before we get started. There we go. Apply, go back, resume. Okay, so let's go and have a little look at little nav map. So we are going to take off from Essendon in Melbourne, and we are going to fly along the coast up to Sydney. We've got a fair few waypoints to program in. We're going to show you how to do that along the way, how to get the aircraft up and running. Before we do anything, I need to make sure that all of my controls are in the correct positions for takeoff. And let's go and have a look inside and just make sure everything's looking good. So we've got independent control of each throttle, which is good. Move the flaps lever now. We've got control of flaps. We've got the air brakes. So I've got good control of the air brakes. Got the parking brake. And I've got you can see the control for the gear is moving as well, so it's looking pretty good. Okay, so first things first, powering up the CJ4. We're going to turn the battery on and turn the avionics on. We get a warning straight away, which we can silence up here. We're getting a warning basically because the aircraft doesn't have the engines running yet. So first things we're going to do while we're sat here is get the engines up and running. So you press these two buttons on the central console and they arm the engine to start up, and then you can hit the starters down here, and that's pretty much it for the CJ4. It really is that simple. We are going to need to turn on the pitot heat. You can see pretty much as soon as the engines come up, you can see the N2 numbers are coming up here. So waiting for them to come up to speed. Just checking we are on the parking brake, because the CJ4 has a habit of rolling once it has power, but we don't have that. We don't have that concern today. While we're doing this, we'll just make sure the flaps are working. So we've just moved the flaps to takeoff position. And okay, so let's go and program our route. Oh, let's get some lights sorted out as well. We've got the engines running, so we ought to have some lights on. We're not going to put the taxi light on just yet, or the seatbelt sign, because we're not actually moving yet. Initialize position. So we go to pos init, and we pick up the existing location, and it puts it in for us. Then we can go to the flight plan, and we are travelling from today YMEN. So YMEN, that's the ICAO code, or the international code for Essendon Airport, and we are flying into Bankstown, Sydney, YSBK. YSBK. 374 nautical miles. We're going to go to performance initialization. We're going to give it a cruise altitude that we're going to fly at. We're going to go all the way up to 36,000 feet. And we are going to go and have a look now at the takeoff configuration. It wants an outside air temperature, which is 20 degrees. It's lovely and sunny. in Melbourne. And that's pretty much it for us, you know, of the things we need to put in. I don't think this aircraft calculates yet, it doesn't work. So we can clear out where it says 20 down here. Okay, let's have a look at our flight plan. Legs. So we don't have any legs yet, we need to set up our departure and arrival. So let's go and have a look at the map, taking the wind into account. The wind is from the northeast at 6 knots. So we're leaving Essendon on runway 8. So we'll have a very slight crosswind, but nothing worth worrying about. So runway 8, and we're following the EN8 standard instrument departure. So runway 08 and the EN8 standard instrument departure, and execute that change. Then we can come back to the departure arrival screen, which we could do by pressing Depart again. And we can say our approach into Bankstown at Sydney is going to be, let's have a look at our plan, we're going to go on the NDB approach, so let's make this a little bit wider, for runway 11, runway 11C. So we've got the NDB for 11C. Let's just have a look at see what other options we've got in here. There's all sorts of different options. So should we use RNAV instead? I'll probably have to go and change this. Let's have a look. Show arrival procedures. RNAV 11C, insert. So I've changed it over to use that instead. Let's just go and have a look and see what that looks like in terms of the airfield. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So we've got a number of waypoints to program in to make our route around the coast. So the first one is Amelie. So if we go and look at the legs page now, we'll have there's our standard instrument departure. Gets as far as a gap in the flight plan, which is the discontinuity you can see. And then it continues on through the legs of the standard approach route into Bankstown. So let's go and program our waypoints in. Amelie is the first one. A-M-E-L-I. And that goes in there. Give it a chance. Is it going to work? Invalid. Delete. Oh, okay. So let's go and clear this out for the moment. You can't put a waypoint after a vector, I don't think. So we're going to go and clear out that vector first. And then we're going to put on top of here, so Amelie. There it goes. Then MCO. MCO. So the general routine for doing this is if you select a waypoint, it will push that waypoint down and insert the one you keyed in front of it. So yeah, they're showing that there's two MCOs, but they are actually very close to each other, so it's not going to make a huge difference. So we'll go for that one. And next we're going to MRYNH. MRYNH. So we insert that as well, and it goes straight in. And next, Wolsey, W-O-L-S-E. W-O-L-S-E. And we can insert that on top of there. And again, there's two of them. We can check the exact information about the waypoint in Little Nav Map. So it's the one at 34 degrees 45. 34.45, there you go, it's that one. So after Wolsey we're going to Hooks. So we insert that after Wolsey. And again there are several called Hooks. So let's just go and double check it. Show information for Hooks. It's at 34.21. So it's that one at the top. Following Hooks we are going to go to Fisher. FISHA. So we plug that in, and again there are multiples, so we can go and double check. Fisher, show information, it's 3354, so it's this. Generally it gives you the closest waypoint at the top. Magyar is the next one. So I'll show you the route we're going to take on Little Nav Map in a minute, and it'll make sense why I've put all these waypoints in, because we're going to do a little bit of a tour of Sydney when we get there. Magyar, Renam is after Magyar, so RENAM. Insert that one, and next page again. RSH goes on top of there, and again there are two of them. That's a wildly different longitude latitude, so it's obviously going to be the first one. And then WSTWM, so WSTWM, let me just double check that. WSTWM, makes sense. That goes in there. And then ISMER is the final waypoint. ISMER. And once we put all of these in, we can execute our plan. And then if we come up here and press format twice, you can actually see the plan. Okay, let's go and have a look on Little Nav Map and show you exactly what we've programmed in. So we are going to take off from Essendon. Let's get this out of the way. We're going to take off from Essendon. We're going to fly across the coast over to MCO or Malakuta, and then we're going to fly north up the east coast towards Sydney, and we're going to turn in over the harbour and loop round before coming into Bankstown. So we are actually going to fly directly over the bridge and then out over follow the river out of the city and then loop round. So it should be quite a nice flight. Okay, we should have enough fuel. So let's have a look at, we've done the pitot heat, we've done the lights. Let's go and turn the seatbelt sign on.
May I have your attention, please?
Let's make sure the throttle is
turned on the seatbelt sign.
Correct.
Please fasten your seatbelt and shoulder harness at this time. Thank you.
So let's have a look at the master control panel for the autopilot. So when we take off from Essendon, we're going to be taking straight off, climbing out to above 1,000 feet immediately. So we'll climb straight for our cruising altitude. So when I roll the altitude knob on this is the master control panel for the autopilot, by the way. So you can see on the primary flight display over here, above the altitude ribbon, there is your target altitude that you're flying to, that you're programming the autopilot for. So when I change the altitude knob, you can see this number changing. So I'm going to spin it round until it gets to 36,000 feet. So we'll do a straight climb out all the way. We will be playing with the throttle along the way, but I'll explain that in a moment. So that's going to get us straight to 36,000 feet eventually. To do it, we're going to use nav mode, which we can't actually select yet. Look, it's not letting us. Now that's probably because we've got discontinuity, so let's just have a quick check. Let's have a look through yeah, there's one here. It may also be that we can't use it while we're on the ground. Previous, yeah, there's another vector there, look. So if I delete that vector and next, previous, that's it, execute. So will it now let us do it? So let's go nav. Yeah, it still won't. So we'll go to heading mode, and it's showing lateral navigation as an option on heading mode, which is quite interesting, really. So the takeoff, if we go into heading mode immediately when we take off, is we want the heading of the runway, which is 77 degrees. So you can see if as I turn the heading knob, this line is moving and the heading is here. So we need to change that to 77. Okay, and the rate we get to that altitude, we have to choose how we're going to get there. You can either use vertical speed mode, which is the VS button, or you can use flight level change mode. We're going to use flight level change for the simple fact that it means the plane is going to control its speed for us. Because when we go to FLC, it appears here, and you can see a 0 appears next to it. If we spin this knob round, this is the speed we want to climb at. So the CJ4 doesn't have an auto throttle, but what it can do is vary the pitch of the nose to maintain the speed we have set. So if you think about it, if the plane can go faster than 250 knots, which it can, it will convert that extra speed into climb rate. Yeah, so it'll climb hard enough to hold at 250 knots. Okay, so we're all set, ready to go. The other thing we haven't done yet is calibrate the altimeter. So I'm going to press B, and that has calibrated us for the ground automatically for the local area. So we are 280 feet above sea level. We can actually confirm that if we go and show information on Essendon. We should find, well, 250 it's showing at this point. I can't imagine there's that much of a slope, but anyway. So we need to taxi down then. So we're going to come out of here, turn right, and come down, and then find our way round to runway 08. Let's just have another quick look at that. So if we loop round, oh, we can turn left actually. So we'll turn immediately left, double back on ourselves, and out down the taxiway. Okay, so off the parking brake, full left. I'm going to ignore the ground crew. You might be able to avoid them anyway. This plane's got a very, very good turning circle. Looks like a busy day at Essendon today. If we just have a quick look at the map to make sure we're going the right way. Yes, we are. So we turn right, follow the taxiway down. We'll be on our way very shortly. Let's centre the view up, down a little bit. So 1, 2, third right. So that's the first. There's the second. There's a runway ahead of us, but we're turning right. So touch the brakes. So we carry on down until we get to the next left. Okay, just turning around onto the runway. Final check round that we've got everything sorted, so we're in heading mode, 77 degrees. We've got nav selected, so its lateral navigation is waiting there. Flight level change mode on the speed up to 250 knots, climbing to 36,000 feet or flight level 360. We've pre-programmed the calibration of the altimeter so it's accurate. The flight is programmed into the FMC and we're good to go basically. So we can, just before we do go, we can go into the index page on the flight management computer and go to the progress page, which gives us some good information along the way. Okay, let's get this show on the road, shall we? So easing the throttles forwards. So maximum thrust. Watching the airspeed. And rotate. And gear up. And flaps up. And autopilot on. The aircraft will now control its ascent rate completely automatically. So you can see it's switched over to lateral navigation automatically, so it's following the flight plan. We know it's following the flight plan because there's a nav button up here that cycles the mode of navigation between the flight management system, which is the programmed route, and VOR. So if we had tuned VOR radios in, which the aircraft does have, we could navigate by those as well if we wanted to. But we're using FMS, which is flight management system. Looking at the live chat, somebody's asking what plane are we in today. We are in the Cessna CJ4 with the working title mod. So you can see there's Essendon disappearing behind us. If we look across, we can see the rest of Melbourne stretched out across the bay there, and there's the city. We're just climbing out. It's a nice sunny morning. We've got live weather, so it's a nice sunny morning in Melbourne. Yes, if you look further along the bay, yeah, you can't quite see anything. There's several other airfields, isn't there? There's Tooradin's down the coast. Over here there's, what's it called? Let's have a look. Moorabbin. So yeah, we're out on our way now. So watch Melbourne disappear behind us. So this aircraft is going to climb pretty much on its own. We're keeping on the altitude. Yeah, we've just come through 10,000 feet, so we can switch to. You'll notice on the barometric pressure there's a push for standard written on it. So if we push that now, it goes to STD here, which means above. Usually it would be 18,000 feet. I've done it a bit early, but we're describing things as we go. Above a certain altitude, and it varies around the world, what the altitude is that you're accepted to do this from. You change your altimeter to a standard pressure calibration so that everybody's is the same. Yeah. So I've done it a few thousand feet early, but it doesn't really matter. This is a simulator, remember. I'm really talking about functional things rather than doing things absolutely by the book. But once we're above 10,000 feet, the 250 knot speed limit doesn't apply anymore. So we can increase the speed on the climb out. So we'll go for 300 knots. The other thing you can do once you get above a given altitude, and again it tends to be 18,000, is you could switch over to using Mach number instead of knots for your indicated airspeed. So So the numbers you would communicate, you might use Mach number instead. You can see below the indicated airspeed ribbon there is the Mach number displayed. Okay, so we're coming up for 290 knots. Climbing at 3,000 feet a minute, or 3,400 at the moment. So you can see the number of feet per minute that we're climbing at. The CJ4 is very, very quick. So we can actually pull the throttle back a bit now. So we're pulling it back to climb. So it's an electronic throttle system. So there are various detents along the movement of the throttle. So there's takeoff mode, there's climb mode, and there's cruise. So it reconfigures the engine to work efficiently in each mode. Okay, so now we've just got this gentle climb up to 36,000. And we can go and sit outside and watch the world go by. It's a bit cloudier than I thought. It was very clear over Essendon, but obviously, yeah, now we've got away from Melbourne. It's actually quite cloudy. I hope this isn't going to be like this all the way, otherwise we're not going to see very much. Have a look at the map, see how we're doing on the route. We're flying out towards our first waypoint at Emily. And notice I said earlier actually about putting the FMC into progress mode. So you can see the purple or magenta, whichever colour you want to say that is, line is, or pink, is 11 minutes away at the speed we're travelling at, 75 miles and counting down. And it gives you a countdown of how much fuel you're required to get there. So it's saying we're going to have not much fuel left at all when we get to Bankstown. But remember, this is going to change because we are going to get to a cruise altitude and the engines will be slackened off, so we'll save a lot of fuel, and we need to descend. Yeah, so that's not an accurate representation of how much fuel we would have left. Notice as we get higher into the thin air, we're going faster and faster. So as the air is getting thinner, we can go faster as well, look, so we can push the aircraft a bit faster. So notice as we've told the aeroplane to increase in speed, it stopped climbing for a moment there, because it's prioritising getting to the target airspeed ahead of getting to the altitude. If that makes any sense. Okay. Yeah, notice now the target airspeed has changed to a Mach number instead of a number of knots. Even though it illustrates it here as knots, that's the actual speed we're doing. So indicated airspeed becomes increasingly inaccurate the higher you get in the sky, whereas Mach number doesn't. So Mach number obviously is measuring the speed of sound through the air, whereas indicated airspeed is just the air pressure. So as the air gets thinner, the the indicated airspeed diverges more and more from your ground speed. So you can see here, look, we're showing 293 knots indicated, but we're actually doing 450 over the ground. And the higher we get, the bigger that disparity will become. So at the moment it's 150 knots different. So engines are ticking over at 96%. All looks good. Climbing at about 1,000 feet a minute. Just coming up through 26,000 feet. If we did want to get to 36,000 quickly, we could obviously trade some of our speed off for altitude. You can see now and again we're hitting turbulence, and you'll see there you go, look, that's the rate of change of the airspeed that you can see shooting up and down. So it's the speed you will be doing in a few seconds if the rate of change you're experiencing is maintained. But obviously with turbulence it doesn't. You know, as soon as you've hit the lump in the air, you're through it and continuing on. Okay, so I'm going to leave the airplane there for a few minutes, and we'll go and put the view in the window, and you can watch the hills of Australia rolling past. Actually, should do it from the outside view. So I put this lake on the flight plan on purpose, so we get something to look at. As we get closer to the coast, we'll see the ocean will get closer and closer. At the moment we're a bit kind of landlocked. I'll show you what I mean. As soon as we get to Amelie, we'll actually have the coast to look at. But until we get there, we're just flying over this mountain range, which in itself is quite pretty. Obviously we're climbing the entire time now, so let's zoom out. Leave that like that. And I'm going to go and grab a coffee, so before I do that, I'm just going to turn the microphone off. I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, I'm back. So, let's have a quick look and see where we are on the route, and more importantly where we are in terms of altitude, because we have to be careful about climbing and leaving it in flight level change mode, because it will start to overspeed. Because when it gets closer to 36,000 feet, the aircraft will level out and go to altitude hold mode on the autopilot, and at that point the thrust will cause us to accelerate, because the plane will have leveled out, it's no longer climbing, but we've got the same amount of thrust that we were using while climbing, so the plane will start to accelerate on the level, and before we know it we'll be overspeeding. So you can see actually it's struggling to make this last few thousand feet. Look, it's not managing to hold on to the target airspeed we gave it earlier, so it's pulling it back on its own. So what we can do is actually go to vertical speed mode now, and we'll go for 1,000 feet a minute, just for the last few thousand feet. So I pressed vertical speed, which changes up to VS, and then used the roller to set 1,000 feet a minute, and you can see it's done it straight away, and we're just about holding on to 250 indicated, or 460 knots ground speed nearly. So you can see we're coming up to our melee. It starts flashing when you get near the waypoint, and it's switched over to the next one, so which is MCO, which is the Malakuta VOR. So the plane's turning on its own, coming up to 34,000 feet. And we can drop the climb rate to 500 feet a minute, and the aircraft begins to gently accelerate. You can see we're just nudging through 1 knot, 2 knots faster, and so on. So you can see on the bottom of the primary flight display, the attitude indicator, there is a cross mark on a strip. That is our position relative to the flight plan. So if we were to turn left and deviate away from the flight plan, that cross would move to the right, meaning the line is to the right of us. Yeah. If we were to turn right, that cross mark would move to the left, meaning the line is to the left of us. So you can look at this and know the path you should have been on, or the course you should have been on, and you can kind of sort it out in your head to know what that means. Because you look at the direction you're going, the direction you should have been going, and look at that marker, and you can tell, even if you didn't have the map display up and running, you'd be able to tell your orientation relative to the line. It's exactly the same process as using a localizer and a glide slope for an instrument landing system. Okay, so let's zoom out on this plan a little bit. So up above here, there's a roller here that changes the range of this display. So if we just roll this knob, you can see we can zoom in and zoom out. If we zoom out, you can see there's Malakuta off in the distance. So if we go and look outside now, we can start to see the coast, and there it is. Fantastic.
Altitude.
Okay, so remember we said about overspeeding. We get the annunciation because we are within 1,000 feet of our target altitude. So the plane is beginning to level off, or not quite yet. In the last few hundred feet though, the nose will come down as it adjusts our climb rate. Because we've already pulled it down to 500 feet a minute, it's not going to be a significant acceleration. So we'll have plenty of time to just edge the throttle back and begin to cruise. Notice on the map display it deletes previous legs as you leave them behind. Yeah, which makes total sense because you're not going to fly back down the route. So it cleans up behind itself. So on the progress page over here on the flight management computer, you can see we've got 11 minutes to MCO, 24 minutes to MRYNH, and eventually there's a few it hasn't shown, so it kind of abbreviates the route to show us it. There's our destination, is always the bottom line on the progress page. So you get the next few waypoints and then the final waypoint. So in 47 minutes time from now we will get to YSBK. Now notice what I said about the fuel, so that's going to go up and up, so it's now saying we're going to have nearly £1,000 left when we land. But it may even be more than that, because obviously once we level out we are going to reduce the throttles. Here comes 36,000 feet. So you can see altitude, hold mode has come up. And the nose is coming down and the plane's starting to accelerate. So we now need to watch that rate of change marker as we pull the throttles gently back away from climb. So we've now gone to cruise mode. Notice it's accelerating even harder because we've kind of got to pull it back from 100%. As soon as you go into the cruise mode area of the throttle, you're back at 100%. But the engines have been retuned for cruising. So they're not, they're not running as powerful a configuration. They're going more for fuel efficiency. So we're just watching the percentages and keeping an eye on the rate of change marker on the indicated airspeed. So you can see I've got slightly less percentage on the right engine, so I'm going to push it up to... Doing my best with my controllers, they're not wonderfully accurate. There we go. So they're within a couple of points of a percentage of each other. And the airspeed is holding pretty steady at about 250 indicated. And the rate of change marker isn't moving around drastically, so that's good. So we're now 36,000 feet and happily cruising along at a stable speed. Now obviously if we fly into different weather systems, which we're not going to by the look of it, the flying through weather systems would cause our indicated airspeed to change. So if you imagine if you ran into a massive headwind all of a sudden, that could overspeed the airframe. So it does pay to give yourself a little bit of margin and not to fly right up against the red line on the overspeeding. I mean, obviously the aircraft can actually go, it can do 280 knots at this altitude. It's just, it's going to shorten the life of the airframe. It's not going to rip it to bits. It is going to overstress it. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much it. We're good to go for the next. Now let's have a look at the timings again. So we're saying MRYNH is in 21 minutes. MCO is in 8 minutes now. So MRYNH, let's get some idea on the map. So we'll be about 2/3 of the way through the flight when we get to MRYNH. Now I have loaded in little nav map the performance file for the CJ4, so it's going to give on here if I put in the altitude, the cruising altitude that we're at. It should work out the top of descent, yeah. So you can now see there's a top of descent marker has appeared. So if we show the altitude plot of our flight, you can see we came up very rapidly and then lessened off our climb until we got to our cruising altitude. So we can maintain this altitude and speed until we get to a few miles before Walsey. And for a controlled, smooth descent down, they're advising to do it there. Obviously we could go later, and just fall to the floor. But it's up to us, so, whether you want to fly a very efficient route or not. And there are many ways of coming down steeper, with either using the air brakes or slowing down at altitude and even dropping flaps slightly, and the air brakes. That's how you get things like an A320, for example, can, if pushed, descend at 5,500 to 6,000 feet a minute. But you have to prepare the aircraft to do it. And what I should point out is you can descend at that rate and not accelerate, but you have to cause enough drag on the aeroplane to allow it to do that. Outside, you can see the coast below us. Can we get Little Nav up a little bit smaller? Ooh, a fatal error has occurred in Little Nav now. Does that mean we've lost our route? But it does, doesn't it? Because I didn't save it. That was really handy. Okay, so we'll have to just keep track of where we are. It's the first time I've had Little Nav crash in quite some time. Okay, so what we can do then, we knew we took off from, we'll just put a simplified version of the flight in, set that as a departure. Boot up. We know we're going up the coast of Sydney. We know we're coming into Bankstown. We know we're coming into the harbour. Was it Magyar? I don't remember. And Fisher, that was on there as well. He's obviously out of order now. So this gives us something to do, doesn't it? While we're just sorting things out. There we go, show arrival procedures. We're coming in on RNAV into 11C. We are doing some flying around in a circle. Let's go and have a look in the aeroplane and see what those waypoints were near the end. So if we go to legs, MCO MRYNH. So we can do a little bit of hunting around in here to show you how we can do this. So within the search panel in Little Nav Map, you can search for nav aids. So we can search for MRYNH. MRYNH, and there it is. And we can add that to our flight plan, and let's put that one back in. Wolsey is another one. So Wolsey, add to flight plan, and that's the wrong one, look. Remove. We need to do it from over here, don't we? Wolsey, remove, delete, selected legs or procedure. So it's that one. It's got it. So after Wolsey, we're going to hooks. So notice if you make the search box a little bit bigger, you do get the region, and obviously YM is the code for this region. So there's hooks. Next page, Fisher, Magyar, Renam. We haven't got Renam. Add to flight plan. So let's turn off the centering so it doesn't keep recentering. There's Renam. Then we earn RSH. So let's go RSH. Now add to flight plan, and then WSTWM. There's WSTSM. SF. But rather than hunt around for it, oh there it is, WSTWM, add to waypoint. We could have searched for it, but we've done it there. And was there another one? Next, ISMA. Add ISMA. So there's our flight plan programmed back in to a fashion, enough that we can see where we're going again. So thanks Little Navmap for doing that, and maybe this time I'll save it. So file, save, flight plan, and save it, and job's a good one. Okay, so you can see obviously we had a waypoint down here that we were following. I'm not going to worry too much about which exact one it was. So within the aircraft we can see we're coming up to MCO. Should we zoom in just a little bit so we can see it in a bit more detail? So this is on a 100-mile range now on the primary flight display. And when we get to within a couple of nautical miles, this will start flashing and the plane will move on to the next waypoint and begin turning. It's quite good at it. There you go, switched over to the next waypoint, aircraft started to bank left. So you'll notice here there's the black marker and there's also this second marker that's moving around. So that's the flight director. Yeah, the one that's moving around. When we line up, it will start banking right. And I'll explain what's going on. The flight director is a separate system than the autopilot. So the flight director is figuring out what the aeroplane needs to do, and the autopilot then follows what the flight director tells it to do. So in order to complete the flight plan, the flight director is saying, okay, given where we are, this is what we need to do next, so we need to roll. Yeah, this can go up and down as well, so it could say, you know, if you needed to climb or descend. So the flight director is the computer looking at where the aeroplane is in the sky and what it's doing, and looking at the flight plan and figuring out what we need to do to change the aeroplane to get it to be on the flight plan. And all the autopilot is doing is following the instruction of what the flight director tells it to do. Now if you can turn the flight director off, there's a button there. If I turn it off, then the autopilot will kick out, because it's got no way of following the FMS plan if it's not being told what to do. Hopefully that makes some sense. So yeah, this little bar you see moving around is the aeroplane instructing itself what to do. Now you can see that it's wavering around at the moment. The reason for that is we've got a strong crosswind at the moment, 27 knots from the left. From the west, I should say. Something that's quite nice in the CJ4 with the working title mod is all the screens are independent. So you can play games with having different things on the screen, so you can glance across. Right, let's go put this back on index progress mode. And that gives us our timings to the waypoints, so we get some idea. So we're 38 minutes out now from Bankstown at Sydney. We are going to descend before we get there early, so we can fly over Sydney low and have a look at the city as we fly through. Okay, let's go and have a look from outside. Get to see, yeah, it's super cloudy, isn't it? So we'll leave that zoomed in for a while. And while we're flying this part of the route, I'm going to go and make myself something to eat, and I'll be back in a few minutes. And we're just cruising along quite happily. And we'll turn the microphone off again for a few minutes. I will put the map display up on the screen now. Okay, I'm back in the cockpit. So, let's quickly have a look at where we are. We're approaching the top of descent at the moment. So, we're about 25 miles from the top of descent. And if you remember from earlier in the flight, we can get rid of this out of the way now. We can see, obviously, there's our loop around Sydney. We can't quite see it on the map yet, but we're going to zoom in anyway now. If you remember from earlier in the flight when we were talking about this, the projected descent in Little Nav Map, which I'm going to have to recreate because remember Little Nav Map crashed. Yeah, so it's actually predicting a far earlier descent than we saw. So we'll start descending now. Now, as soon as I pitch the nose down to begin the descent, the aircraft will start accelerating, so we can use flight level change mode in exactly the same way we saw earlier. So all we need to do that is move the target airspeed. So if we go flight level change, obviously it defaults to the speed we're doing right now. So we can change our altitude and it won't move. Or it shouldn't do too much. Yeah, it's centering back on itself. Because it's trying to maintain the same speed. The only way it will begin to fall is if we reduce the throttles. So I'm just moving the target altitude down because we're in flight level change mode, remember. So we're going to come back down to 10,000 feet initially. So that's 10,000 feet, it's been set. So in order to make that happen now, all I have to do is pull the throttles back. So I'll pull us back idle and watch the descent rate climb. So it can easily, we can fall at 5,000 feet a minute. So if we increase the engines again, so we can use the throttles to govern how quickly we fall. So 2,500 feet a minute or thereabouts will be fine. So we will be looking to come down earlier than this so we can fly in through. We want to be down at 10,000 or below 10,000 feet by kind of Magyar if we can. If we remember looking at the map where Magyar is, it's as we turn into the bay, so 5,000 feet would be even better actually. So we've got like 5,000 feet. The red line is showing here because of the hills that were earlier in the journey. So let's go and clear out the altitude plot and let it redraw. We can actually zoom in on this. Can you notice the aircraft is continually recalculating the top of descent based on we are now much lower than we were, so it's actually getting slowly further away from us. As we're coming into the thicker air, you can see the rate of descent is increasing. Because there's more resistance on the aeroplane, therefore it can descend more steeply to maintain the same speed. Notice the indicated airspeed number is actually increasing as well. That's again because it's maintaining the same actual speed, not the same indicated speed. So it's moving as we descend and the air gets thicker. This number is increasing, but in real terms we're doing the same speed. So let's pull that further away from the overspeed marker, because we are going to be, before too long, notice that, yeah, look, to reduce speed it's had to pull the nose up, so the descent rate has slowed right down. We can obviously counter that by just dropping the throttles. So flight level change mode, it takes a little bit of getting your head around. Once you get used to it, it's actually a really nice way of climbing and descending. Here comes G Flat in the live stream chat. G'day from Melbourne. Sorry to be late. I was watching last night's University Challenge on YouTube. That's a good point. I wonder if my other half has watched it. She religiously watches University Challenge. It's one of her favourite programmes. I have to go tell her in a moment. We played Trivial Pursuit against each other a couple of evenings ago, and it was our worst display at Trivial Pursuit that I can remember. We were both atrocious. Usually the game's over quite quickly, you know, it's maybe an hour tops, but yeah, for some reason, or less than that, for some reason we were just getting nowhere, and we just kept pulling out ridiculous questions. Okay, so we're looking to be down at sort of 5,000–6,000 feet by the time we get to Magyar. Then we'll be able to fly over the city and see it quite clearly. So let's have a look on this plot. I think we're going to be good to... We're about on course for that to happen, by the look of it. If not earlier. So let's increase the throttle slightly, which will reduce the descent rate. The other way to descend, other than using flight level change, is obviously to use vertical speed mode. So we could say we want to come down at a given rate, so say 1800 feet a minute, as you can see on the target here by rolling the roller. And now we have to control the airspeed with the throttle directly. So rather than setting the airspeed and the plane uses its pitch to maintain the airspeed, we have now set the vertical speed, so the plane is diving in a very consistent manner at exactly 1800 feet a minute, and the speed will wander. So if we want to go faster, we give it more throttle, and if we want to slow down, we give it less throttle. The huge advantage of flight level change mode is in climbing, because you can't stall in flight level change mode, because the aeroplane is going to maintain the speed it was told to, if it possibly can. Yeah, so it will get rid of pitch to maintain the speed. And the same thing for descending. In flight level change mode, you will not overspeed, because the aeroplane will pull the nose up to prevent you from overspeeding. So it's much more safe. Yes, G Flat, I've already had a coffee. I disappeared for quite a few minutes earlier and went and made some toast as well. On the long flights, yeah, I always tend to have a coffee halfway through. I think the sim has just paused. Hopefully it will unpause itself. There it goes. Okay, what has it just done outside of the aeroplane? Because I just heard skier travelling. I've noticed that when it pauses, when the sim pauses and then unpauses, all of the controls cycle for about 1/10 of a second. Okay, so let's zoom in a bit further. So we've now got the symbology showing of where we will get to our target altitude in terms of, you know, our travel along this path. We actually want to come down to 5,000, or 6,000 would be probably a bit better. The only thing we have to be mindful of here is now we're below 18,000, we can go for an accurate barometric pressure for the local area. We can also get ready that once we get to 10,000 feet we'll have to get to 250 knots. So we can start doing that now. If I pull the engines back, we need to descend more quickly as well if we're going to get to our target altitude in time. So go for 2,500 feet a minute, and we're at 250 knots indicated now. So I can start pushing the throttles gently forwards just to stop decelerating, which we've now done. And yeah, you can see the line is coming in for the point at which we will reach our target altitude, which is perfect. So we're going to fly in over the Sydney Harbour Bridge and then fly a few waypoints around the city on the way round back to Bankstown. It's all looking very good at the moment. So we can see over to our left that'll be Sydney International, I imagine. Yep, Kingsford Smith. So we can start looking out the window now. If we were a little bit lower earlier we might have been able to see some more of the city on the way in, but we'll be able to see it soon enough. So that's the international airport. But we're not landing there today. If we just go and refresh our memory on the map, we're landing at Bankstown, which is a bit further away. So if you imagine that's there, we're landing, it's going to be somewhere out over there. But we're going to do a loop round to get there. How are we doing on the altitude? I wonder what the ceiling is on these clouds. It's going to be an interesting one to try and judge that, isn't it? So G Flat is saying, you're going to Bankstown, watch your wallets. So is it not a really good area then? So there you can see the city through the cloud down there. Welcome to City. There's the welcome to Sydney, I should say. There's the Opera House. So let's get another look at this. So we'll zoom in a little bit further. Let's go for 5,000 feet, so we can get a little bit closer look. William Kelly is saying hello from California. Hi California. And the cloud has arrived to obscure our view for the moment. Just coming down to 6,000.
Altitude.
About to make the turn. So we're going a little bit fast, so I'm just coming off the throttles. See the entrance into the bay is coming up. So yeah, looking at the cloud levels, I'm going to descend down to 4,000 or 3,500, that'll do. Continuing down at 2,500 feet a minute.
Altitude.
And let's slow ourselves down significantly now so we get time to actually look on the way past. So throttles back to idle. Let's... yeah. The airplane's levelling itself out. Yeah, we're going to go for 3,000 feet. Vertical speed 500 feet a minute. Just keeping an eye on the indicated airspeed over there. We're about to make the turn at Magyar towards Renan. William Kelly, yes, we are approaching Sydney. So I just want to make sure I don't get too slow. Before I go and look outside. There's Sydney Opera House, there's the city, there's the international airport over there, there's the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Yeah, on about Sydney being a huge sprawl. I know somebody that lives in Melbourne, and it's always amazed me. It just goes on and on for miles, the suburban. You can see it here, look, it just stretches on and on for miles and miles. Okay, let's go and have a look inside. So we're going to be turning in a moment. You can see down there the various buildings of the commercial part of the city. There's the international airport. We should be able to see Bankstown ahead of us. Is that it there, I think? And we're obviously turning away from it now, just to loop round. We're getting a bit slow. Yeah, so there's Bankstown where we're going to be landing soon. Or I think it is. It's not rendering it yet. Or is it over there? It's difficult to tell, isn't it? It's about that direction, so I'm just looking at the aircraft over there. It's usually a pretty good indicator if you can see aircraft lights. Or is this it? We'll see. We'll get there soon. We'll get there soon enough. Go and look at the other side. Suburban sprawl. Football grounds, cricket grounds. There's a stadium down there. Aussie Rules Football Stadium. Okay, let's have a look at our waypoints. We're about to turn right again. We're holding on to about 200 knots. Horse racing track down here. Okay, so we need to be thinking about descending to get ready for approach. So we're at 3,000 feet, we're going to come back down to 2,500 now. Vertical speed, do it at 500 feet a minute. Obviously the aircraft is trying to accelerate, so we just come off the throttle gently. We're going to fly over the suburbs for a few minutes before we turn into the approach for Bankstown. Let's have a look and see if we have any restrictions on the way in. So if we go and have a look on the map. I think it's a bit wider. So yeah, 2,500 feet on the way in, look. Below and 180 knots. So that's when we get to that first marker. So we're just turning around further up here, look. When we get to here we need to be 2,500 feet, 180 knots, and then we have to remain above 1,500 feet at the next waypoint. But by then we will be visual with the runway. So let's have a look, see what we're doing. So we're still doing 200. We've only got to lose 20 knots to get within the restrictions. We can just enjoy the view for a few minutes then until we get there. The scenery in Flight Sim is ridiculous, isn't it? There we go, about to make the left turn towards the approach. Got my head in the ceiling where I was messing around with the views. Start to see the houses below and the cars on the roads. Okay, it's time to start to get busy in a moment. Start looking for the airfield as well. Okay, we need to be 180 knots, so let's just lose that last 10 knots. Just gently wind the throttles back. Do we have a visual yet on Bankstown? Can we see it? There it is. Or I presume that's it. And this is another airfield exactly in the same direction. So there's the... or maybe not. Okay, so this ILS... oh, sorry, this waypoint hasn't lined us up wonderfully. We're going for the centre runway, so I'm going to come off of the autopilot now and line us up by hand. So flaps down to the first position and gear down. Time to earn my keep. Just confirm, looking at the runways. The one in the middle is the centre runway, which is the one we're after. And we're going for full flaps now. So this is a visual approach. So if you're not aware, this is the RNAV approach. RNAV stands for area navigation. So you're using waypoints and heights from the flight plan and then visual for the final approach. But you can do it, you know, with instruments, but you get to a decision height because obviously you don't have a glide slope. Obviously we've got a very clear day, so it's not a problem for us. Just keeping an eye on the speed. Gear is down, flaps are down. It's all looking good. Flaps up. Now, which way is the terminal here? That's the... I presume it's over here. This is the other runway. Yeah, it's over. Parking's over here. Obviously I've got no ATC switched on, so we've got free rein to find our way around the airfield. Let's have a look from outside. So there we go, we've arrived at Bankstown. Fairly drama-free approach really, wasn't it? How did I know he was going to do that? You would think aircraft would get right away, wouldn't you? So where are we going to park? Anywhere will do, won't it? Over in this area over here. Okay, parking brakes on. Engines off. Oops, it's here, isn't it? That's the engine switched off. Lights off. Seatbelt off. Pitot heat off. Shut the warnings off. And then we can turn avionics off and turn the master battery power off, and the whole thing goes dark. And that's it, we're done. So there we go, we're at Bankstown in the CJ4 after flying in from Melbourne, from Essendon, about an hour and 20 minutes or so ago. So there you go, a flight in the CJ4. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.